Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. If you have a company that dispatches any type of transportation that hauls cargo, fuels, liquids, whatever it might be, definitely want you to listen up. And then even for the rest of us, an education today as to what's on the road. Yeah, we're on the interstate, the freeway, the expressway. We pass something, a big rig. What goes into the safety of that vehicle? We're talking almost 100,000 pounds barreling down the road, 55, 65 miles an hour. There's a lot that goes into that. His life's work is to make sure that those vehicles are safe because he works with those motor carrier companies. It's all about safety first. And Matt Freeman. Matt, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, doing well, Steve. Thanks again. Looking forward to a good show again today and talking a little bit about what goes into those cargo tanks and what the inspectors got to look for and the detail of it.
Sure. And we've brought back an expert to help us out with that. Tell us who that is.
This is Randy Decker. He's one of our lead trainers and consultants, one of our cargo tank specialists. He does most of our classes for us along with our others. We're going to talk about what he's seeing out there. We're talking to our students and customers out there in the field.
Cool. Randy, welcome back.
Well, good to be back, Steve. Thank you.
Yeah, we learn a lot every time you're on here. And we never really got deep into the testing of those cargo tanks. And when we talk about cargo tanks, what are we referring to? Is this the big cylindrical rigs that carry fuel and different substances?
There's many varieties of the cargo tanks. Typically, everything that we see going up and down the road is, round or cylindrical and maybe V-bottom. But for the most part, yes, hull liquids. So they may be spec or non-spec, but we cover spec trailers. And, that's where all the rules and regulations come into play.
It's being the non-expert here. It sounds like a daunting task and responsibility, knowing that you are inspecting or others are inspecting these tanks and setting them free. How do you know for sure that we're good to go with that particular tank?
You don't.
Okay.
That's why we're out there. The regulations, it's a big old area. People teach, part 180 of the regulations, and they go out there and they tell them. And, we cover 180 and what we call 178-345, which, I'm not from the enforcement side. I'm from, the industry. We kind of look at as building a tank. So if you're going to build a tank, you got to know how it's built before you can inspect it. So we go back, 180 is testing and what tests are required. So then, we're going to talk about markings. Well, if you don't know what markings are required by law, it's kind of hard to inspect them. So, 180.407, D says that we must inspect all markings to make sure that they're legible. Okay. You go up on a trailer and you see a marking. Yeah, it's legible. But is it right? Is it the right part that you're inspecting? And a lot of that information comes off the data plates or spec plates, name plates. Regulations calls them nameplates and specification plates. Everybody out in the world calls them data plates. They always have, But go ahead, Matt. You was gonna...
No, just to clarify on the regulation we're talking about is in 49 CFR. It's the hazardous materials regulations with USDOT that we're talking about, and it's strictly in the hazmat regulation. So we're quoting code out there that's those specific regulations that that we need to make sure everybody's looking at when they're doing cargo tank inspections.
Now you can see how far I just dump right into it and take off. because it's the area that I specialize in, you
Sure.
know. So thank you, Matt. I forget to say that, you know, the CFR 49 parts 100 through 185. It's where everything to do with hazmat goes. Um, Shippers, package manufacturers. I mean, everything is in there. Um, so the I'm not going to say it's the most important, but where we start with our cargo tanks is looking at the nameplate and finding out what type of cargo tank am I working on? What do I have to test? So you have to go to the nameplate. Well, the markings that are there have to be legible. You know, um, some of the older tanks, it gets a little less legible.
Mhm.
Then you come up with a registered inspector that's been doing it for 30 years. He knows what all the numbers are, but if Steve went up beside it and looked at them, he wouldn't. So, you know, is it legible to him? No. Is it legible to someone that works on them all the time? Yeah, it's not legible, but it's you can do it. You know, it's got all the markings. You know what's familiar. You know, and so we have to teach them. It's if your mom come out here to test this tank, would she know what all these numbers mean? No, because it's rubbed away. So you get your maximum allowable working pressure, which is the MAWP, uh, on the trailers. Some are as low as 3. Some of them are as high as we'll stay within regulations, say 35. You got different areas that if it goes above 35, like on a 407, then it goes into a whole nother world of rules and regulations. So, well, you've got to be familiar with all that, so you can test it and inspect correctly.
For the
Go
rest
ahead.
of us, can
Oh,
we, what are some of those things that on those plates that we as the public could identify? Maybe certain colors. I've seen, oh, my memory here, yellow. I've seen red. The numbers. I don't even
Oh,
know if we could break those down.
okay, that's on the placarding. Yeah. So on the markings, your placards, um, your most common is going to be your red with the 3 on it, showing that you're your gasoline. Your 1203, you'll see 1203 for gasoline as well. Those are your common ones. You also see a 3 for uh, a red placard with a 3 on it. Say 1993. Uh, if your diesels, your different, your most common stuff. Um, on the other side, the markings, you're also looking at, um, you're trying to think here as far come off the spec plate. There's certain markings on that spec plate that you got to see to be able to identify how to test that tank. Um, and those specification plates you got to actually get up and look at. So a key thing here is about the markings that you're seeing. That's showing you what type of hazardous material, what class is being transported. But the kicker is you go back to the spec plate to see what kind of tank that is, because depending on what is being transported in that tank, that spec plate is going to be able to tell you if you can transport it in that tank or not. That's where you go back to the regulations and see if you can haul it in that particular type of tank. And that's some of the markings that Randy is talking about on being able to read that specification plate, because and I'll let him talk about, depending on it, you have a corrosive versus a non-corrosive. Um, if you go to see if it's depending on the type of tank it is, by the spec plate and by what the regulations read, you may not be able to transport in there. So those markings on the side of the tank, your placards are important. But the reason they are put there is because of what is identified by the spec plate and the chemical or the hazmat that goes in that tank. So, Randy, you want to kind of talk about how you can tell like when you can or cannot put it in there from the spec plate?
yeah. Now, Steve, the spec plate that we keep referring to, or the nameplate, is a VIN plate for the vehicle. Um, so it's most common on the right side near you know the front quarter of the trailer. Okay, so I say right side. I'm sorry, it's on the left side. I'm getting backwards here. It's on the right side on a gas trailer on a 306 if it was built before 85. So, again, you have to know all that when you're testing these trailers. You can't assume that it's in the right location, So, um, depending on the type. But back to what Matt was saying, um, like you go to sulfuric acid, you know, it's hauled up and down our highways every day. What kind of trailer is it in? Well, typically it's, 407, 412. If you use what we call the 101 table, the hazmat table that you go to find out what product can be hauled in a trailer, you follow it through, the book, and you find out, okay, it has to be this stainless steel and it's got to be lined with a non-metallic type lining. So it's either rubber or an epoxy that doesn't have epoxies don't do very well with sulfuric acid. So, you get all this information off the spec plate because those are required markings on the spec plate. It's lined. What is it lined with? It gives the material, you know. Um, so as the tester, to be extremely careful. Of course, no one works on a trailer, or should I say, with a trailer that hasn't been cleaned and purged of all hazardous materials. So you get that information. Does it have what we call in-transit heat? Heat lines in the bottom of the tank. Well, if it does, they have to be tested during the pressure test. Now, again, most of these are out there in the field as what we call DOT 407 cargo tanks. Those would be the ones that are most generally insulated, in-transit heat. You load a product, say like polymer. Well, if you let it get too cold, it doesn't unload very well. It plugs up your trailer. So, you got a 3-inch or 4-inch outlet, typically at the rear. So, you got different things. How much heat can I put on it? Well, that information's on the nameplate. It tells you. What about your exposed venting surface? How much exposed area in cubic square feet can you vent? Okay, so it gives you the cubic square feet of each compartment if it's a multi-compartment cargo tank, or the single compartment. Well, your pressure relief devices have to be able to vent off enough venting capacity for these to work. So if your vent's not big enough, you may end up with a catastrophic failure, which is not good when you have these type of chemicals, running up and down the highway.
Randy, have you ever had a situation, and even Matt, either you inspected or even you heard of, where a trailer cargo tank was hauling a material that shouldn't have been in there? And somehow, I don't know how, but it got in there. Any stories come to mind?
Yeah, there has been instances where I've come across throughout my years, and then I know some of my other friends, associates, and did the roadside, that you go down the road, you stop a tank, and it's literally just leaking, and come to find out they've thrown a corrosive chemical in a tank that can't carry corrosive, just because they said, hey, and this is very common. Hey, can you do that? We're going to pay a good load for whatever it is. We need a one-time trip. And it happens. They don't think about what kind of tank, material it is. Can it go in there? Yeah, it is not uncommon to come across that. If I can share my screen, I'll show you the spec plate we're talking about here.
Sure.
And while he's doing that, Steve, I'll go ahead and tell you, my previous job, we had a 406, which is a fuel trailer that, during a test we had, it was a 5-year test, so they had to do the internal. We found an excessive pitting inside that trailer. You know, we couldn't figure out what was hauled on it. Like Matt says, it's a one-time load. A driver goes in, maybe the trailer's not there that he was assigned, so he picks up another trailer. He goes out there and pulls that one load thinking, it's all right, it's just one load. Or, dispatch, these things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Then when it come test time, we had to scrap the trailer because, the inside of it was pitted beyond repair.
Wow. How did you discover that situation inside the trailer? The routine
Every
inspection?
side on this particular trailer, it gets a internal. So we go inside the trailer and do an internal visual inspection. So you're looking at baffles and bulkheads. You're looking at the whole set thing on the inside, looking for cracks on welds, un uneven surface, pitting.
Pitting.
We're looking at all that type of stuff on the internals. If we didn't follow the regulations and just let it keep running, who knows what would happen? Going down the highway, at one point it'd get too thin, and we know what could happen at that point.
Sure. Matt, what are we looking at here?
So this is a spec plate, nameplate that Randy's talking about here. So this is on the front left side of the tank. Okay, it's always going to be in the front left, fairly close to the front head of the cargo tank. This here is what we call a DOT 406 cargo tank that we're looking at. Okay, this is your typical everyday petro hauler. Okay, these are multi-compartment, carrying your gasoline, your ethanols, your diesels, trailers. Now they do haul other things. They are single compartments, but this one here is particular. Let's see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 compartments here. That this one is so this one can transport up to 4 different chemicals. Let's see here. So we're looking at the MAWP that Randy was talking about. This particular MAWP is 3.3 maximum allowable working pressure, right? This is important on these tanks because you got to look at your pressure relief devices, and they're required to offset whenever these pressures get higher than what you're supposed to, and this helps keeping that pressure in that tank at a normal level. Okay, so that's what Randy was talking about. You have your different test pressures. I'll let Randy go ahead and talk about the plate here, but this is the primary what we're talking about here as far as identifying.
So on the nameplate there, Steve, the MAWP being 3.3. Okay, so yearly I have to do the external visual K test, KEPA method 27 test. And so when I'm looking at this, just from markings, when I say MAWP of 3.3, it's going to tell me that my PRD, my pressure relief device, has to open at a minimum of 110% of the MAWP, which is 3.63. Now, when you go back into regulations, all pressure relief devices have to be marked with certain things. Manufacturer, set to open, model number, and you've got to have your venting capacity at PSI, at the PSI that it vents that. So when you're looking at all that, you're already getting those numbers on your head, okay? My PRD's got to be marked with 3.63. My venting capacity, Matt, if you'll go down and show the exposed surface area, just say for compartment number 1. drop down, just there you go.
There we
So
go.
compartment 1 has exposed surface area of 296. Now I got to convert that over to cubic square feet because that's what the pressure relief devices are made with. Well, let me turn my book here to my cheat sheet because, how many of us know that off the top of our head, right? So 296 cubic feet would have to vent off a minimum of 223,372 square cubic feet. And it has to do this. Now, this you can't test. It's all falls back on the manufacturer. This pressure relief device has to open and close and leak no more than 1 liter in 60 milliseconds to vent off that trailer. So in the case of that pressure surge, so when you're looking at all this, it can keep something catastrophic from happening. So if you have a vent that's too small and won't vent it off, we're in trouble.
Mhm.
Now, does it just damage the tank or does it do more? So that's just off the MAWP. Also off the MAWP, you have to do a leak test. Well, it's at no less than 80% of the MAWP. So there's so much information that you can grab, and there's some other numbers there that I didn't go into just on the pressure relief device, that you have to go and look and verify.
So a couple of quick questions based on this plate for this particular tank. I'm going to try and verbalize this, but when a tank is made, and all right, let's say I'm very hypothetical here. You have a 35-foot long tank. It's got a certain width, all of that. It's whatever the standard size is for that size tank. Is this information kind of the basic information, or is this specific to that particular tank?
It's specific to that particular tank.
Okay. Next question. You got your, PSIG original test date. Is that's when that was done? It says here September of 2019. Maybe that was when the tank was manufactured. I don't know.
Yes.
But okay, so now we fast forward 5 years, 10 years. Tests are done. Is it reasonable to think these numbers will or could change? And if so, do we come up with a new plate that replaces this one with a new test date?
Well, things can change, and they do change quite frequently. That would be called a modification. So yes, if a modification has been made, you have the spec plate, nameplate has to show that modification has taken place. Okay.
Gotcha.
With that modification, you have to go to an R stamp shop. They're the only ones that can do it. Okay. It's a repair procedure. Then on top of that, it has to be verified through a design certified engineer that by making these modifications, it still meets DOT regulations. Okay. So that could be accident damage protection, that could be venting capacity. It just keeps going on. But basically it's structural integrity of the cargo tank.
Wow.
To also go back to your question, that tank is built. So this DOT 406, that is the style of tank. So it has to be built to the ASME regulations to what the DCE goes by. Okay, so the design certified engineer designs it off of what ASME code allows him to build it at. So that's that particular style of tank, which a 406 cargo tank or a 306 cargo tank is going to be, like I said, your typical petrol haulers. Now, this original test date, so let's say there was nothing changed about this cargo tank. Okay, those numbers and markings you see on the side, front left side of the tank, see the date and the month and the year on there. You just see month and year. That's what these go off of. Okay, so on an annual inspection, the next one you're going to, you should see on this tank, okay, would be 9, then 20 for 2020. So that's how you kind of know, that's how they know how to go off of the inspections on the cargo tank. You go from the original test date 1 year out on an annual inspection. And then the same thing with your 5-year inspections as well. Because when you do, when they come out of the manufacturer, they're required to have all the tests conducted on these tanks, just like you go into a shop. So when it goes out, it's been through all the testing, all the requirements, and then it can go out into the world. But yeah, this here and right here is exactly what Randy was saying. Now, like Randy said, I'll kind of repeat a little bit, but what he said was if there is some type of change, modification to the cargo tank that alters things, then those test dates can change, and that's what we're looking at here. And when they make those alterations, it's going to replicate through here.
Got it. Super interesting how this whole process works. Even right down to how they fix this plate on a. Final question. We're out of time, but I got to ask. I'm curious. There's rivets that I can see here. Where is this plate? Is it literally on the cargo tank?
Now, Steve, you know better than that.
I got to ask.
Typically, because you can't have everything connected to the tank. Now, it's usually on the frame rail with the tank sets on near the front.
Okay.
Up above the fender areas, you'll see it on the front of the tank. So if you got the front head right here, and you're coming back and you're going backwards, look on the left side. So anywhere on that left side on that frame rail where the tank sets on, you'll see it.
Got it. Yeah, just kind of curious if where that.
So if you're close by one, if you go by a cargo tank and just happen to go up and look near the front left side, usually where the markings are, down by somewhere, you're going to see that plate. Sometimes they're long, sometimes they're small, but you'll see it.
Got it.
Now, with that said, Steve, I will tell you that one of the facilities that I was doing a class at said that one of their new guys, they told him to go fasten this guard on a side of a trailer, and he did actually drill it and use pop rivets. That was before the test, and after the test, they found that they had more leaks. Needless to say, that employee no longer works there.
Was that employee's name Wile E. Coyote?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. We'll go with that one.
Yeah,
Curious.
exactly.
I don't know. Fascinating, though, learning all of this stuff. Matt, dottrainingsolutions.com. Is that your website?
It is.
Okay. And anybody that's connected to a motor company that does transportation, any of that, obviously they're concerned with safety, but that's not necessarily in their wheelhouse. That's what you do. How does that process work? They reach out to you and they can pick your brain and then see if it's a right fit?
Absolutely. Give us a call, ask us any questions, and if we can help you, we'll be right there for assistance, whatever we can do.
Beautiful. Matt.
Safety first.
And Randy, thank you so much for being here today. Learned a lot. Definitely. Now I'm going to be obsessed. Every time I see a tank go by, I'm going to either try and read the placard or see the plate. If let's say it's in a gas station and I'm just running in to get, a bag of chips or something. But like you said, it's safety first. That is really the key. Thank you so much for being here, both of you.
All right. See you, Steve. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.